Welcome back to another episode of NFL News on the Boom and Bust channel. I'm your host Terry, and today I want to take some time, just quick few minutes, and talk about some of the most disappointing teams in the NFL this year. I was talking about this with a friend earlier, and I was thinking about it last week. This has been a very interesting year, and I thought it was an interesting topic because it is a number of candidates that you can pick from when you're talking about who's been disappointing this year. I think when you look around the league, there's the obvious choices. So you have the LA Rams, I think you start with, because they're the defending Super Bowl champs. And for them to not even, I can't even say Super Bowl hangover because that's usually for the loser, but not even just a Super Bowl hangover, but to completely fall off the map. In the way they did, it's been kind of crazy. And then you look at the Denver Broncos. Really, you go to the AFC West. You got the Denver Broncos, who got Russell Wilson, and of course, many people are going to say, "Yeah, I already knew Russ wasn't good and all that." In hindsight, but I think most people looked at that, even though I didn't think it was like a top tier move, because not to say a top tier move. I didn't think there'd be a top tier team. I definitely didn't realize that they had the pieces to be the number one defense, even without Bradley Chubb. And they were for a while, not that they are now, but they are still in the top three. I didn't realize that, but I knew they were a good defense. And obviously with the run game and those receivers and Russ, I still thought they weren't the best I thought they were the last in the West, but I didn't think they'd be this bad. I don't think anyone thought that. And then you have the Chargers and all their acquisitions. Then you got the Raiders getting Devontae Adams, and all of those teams just really not living up to snuff. And then you got the Tampa Bay Bucks, who, thanks to a bad division, probably will still make it into the playoffs. Otherwise, not guaranteed that they would even made the playoffs after being kind of one of the biggest threats over the last few years. And so that's kind of the group that I'm thinking of, trying to make sure that there's no other teams that are coming to my mind. But when I think about disappointing seasons, those are the teams that my mind immediately goes to. And so when talking about the most disappointing team, like I said, it's a stacked group up there. So it's kind of hard to say for sure which one is which, but that's kind of where we are. For me, though, I think it's a tie, or at least a battle between the Raiders and the Rams. Those would be my picks. And I say that because with the Rams, the fall off was crazy. I might have tipped my hand a little bit earlier, but they're coming off a Super Bowl, and yes, they lost Andrew Whitworth to retirement, but Whitworth wasn't elite. I mean, he was solid in his last year, but he wasn't like elite. And even with the rest of the offensive line, it wasn't like a great offensive line. And not to say they were bad, but I'm just saying, like, for them to come into this year and to look the way they looked, mainly in that first week because of the offensive line, which then kind of continued throughout the weeks as they got hurt, it would be one thing if they had like some top tier group last year, but I don't think they did. I think they had a solid offensive line that did their job enough to let really Matthew Stafford and everybody do their thing. And they ran the ball way better last year. No contest, but you're not talking about a top 3 rushing attack. So I think the line was solid. And so for you to lose one or two guys, and look that completely poor is wild to me. Now, I don't know if the Rams lost the O-line coach or whatever, but I just still don't see any way that the offensive line drops off that far. And so the question that I ask is, which offensive line was worse? the Rams had week 1 this year, or the offensive line that the Bengals had in the Super Bowl. Because a lot of people would tell you that offensive line was absolutely horrible, and I think 4 to 5 got replaced, and they still made it to the Super Bowl. So to say that and I'm not trying to say offensive line is not important. Very opposite. It's very important, but still, the Bengals showed that they could still win games with a underperforming O-line. And I just don't think, and some people are probably going to claim they are, but I just don't think the Rams came into the season with like a god-awful college offensive line. And so, I mean, you have players that played there from last year. So throughout the season, obviously they had a lot of rotation, but to be the worst running team in the league, and really McVay's system, as much as people talk about passing, his system is built off running and play action. It's stretch zone and play action. And so for them to be the worst running team, and I don't know if they still are, but they were the worst running team in the league in almost every category for a long stretch. And to have Aaron Donald, Ramsey, to add Bobby Wagner, who is playing great, and the defense statistically wasn't horrible, but obviously they weren't doing what they were doing last year to give the team the benefit. And the offense obviously had a huge drop-off. So for that team to come out and look the way they did while healthy, for the most part, it's just a shock. And then for them to start losing the injuries or losing players to injuries, and then becoming just pretty much a team that is almost guaranteed to lose every week, it's crazy. So, and then now you got Baker Mayfield. But really all that doesn't matter. I mean, like I said before, any of the injuries, you had this problem. So the fall off was crazy to me. And then the Raiders, now some people are going to say they played close games most of the time, and yeah, because they were blowing leads. And so the way they were losing was almost just as bad as them losing. And then on top of that, I didn't expect the defense to take some jump. I know some people did with Chandler Jones, but the defense still was what it was. For me, I'm like, how do you add Devontae Adams to Darren Waller and Winfrey? And while healthy, the stats plummeted for the other two guys. It's really hard, and I'm not going to simplify it. I know there's a lot of ways things can go wrong, but in my mind, you watch the Raiders and you see Waller just not getting production, not getting targets. Winfrey just disappearing. In my mind, you would have at least thought that, hey, even if the defense, doesn't dominate, even if they don't give us turnovers and all that, this offense is going to keep us in games. And a lot of times that just wasn't the case. The offense was as much as a problem as the defense. And so, they're starting to win some games now. Some people say, oh, they're probably going to make playoffs. But that is a far cry from what we expected coming into this year. And I don't fault anybody for the takes they had about the Raiders coming into the year. Honestly, I would have been right there if it wasn't for Josh McDaniels. That's the one part where I'm like, I don't know how this is going to work out. And honestly, I'm not going to put all the blame on him, but I think that's the biggest thing when you look at the roster and you look at what they did previously, and you project, okay, they should be able to do X, Y, Z. And to see them again, not only lose the way they lose, but the times that they've looked like lost on offense, it's kind of crazy. So from where I had them in my mind to where they are now, it's hard for me to pick between the Rams and the Raiders. And I guess you could be tempted to say the Raiders because They haven't had all the catastrophic injuries the Rams have had, but still, I would probably put them even. But then the Rams put themselves in that situation. The whole F that pick movement, and they just barely reloaded. And so, you put that roster out there, which again, you didn't lose many people, and you just completely look like a shell of the team you used to be. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. What about everybody else? Who do you think is the most disappointing team in the league this year? Go down in the comment section, let me know, share it around, get the conversation started, and thank you for listening.